recanting that entire.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Thanks for joining us, people. Got a great show today. We got Michael Robinet from S&P Global, Keith Naughton from Bloomberg, and Gary is here.
How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. I am. I mean, I'm not just saying that to say that. I'm doing great.
Well, good. Good, because we'll need it because we got this show with these guys here.
I know.
Global mobility, just to add the mobility to Michael's title.
S&P
there.
We are
Global.
mobile.
Yeah.
Yes, we are mobile.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you're
Okay.
mobile and global.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So you want to kick this off with a question? Get these guys cranked up or what?
Well, okay. So I know Keith, who covers Ford for Bloomberg, has been like cranking it because of yesterday's earnings.
Yes, it was very.
So give us a synopsis of what happened.
And just to quickly interject, we're talking about second quarter 2025 Ford earnings.
That is correct.
Take it away, Keith.
It was this sort of good news, bad news story. I mean,
Where's the good news?
Well, they beat all the analyst estimates.
That doesn't mean anything.
Well,
They lost money.
Normally it would, and the stock is up today.
It was down 3% yesterday.
It's up today
How much?
by about 3%.
Okay, so nothing happened,
So,
essentially.
Yeah. Move along.
nothing to see here.
But anyway, so they beat analyst estimates on revenue, on profit, on everything. I mean, profits way down, and from a net basis, they lost money. But on the other hand, the tariff hit got bigger. A $2 billion tariff hit.
For the year is what they
year,
announced, right?
Instead of the
And it was what, 800 million for last
800
quarter?
for the quarter, but their previous estimate 3 months ago was that the tariff hit would be 1.5 billion for the year. So it's growing, and the frustration for them that Jim Farley, the CEO, described is that all these trade deals that Trump is now cutting with Japan and last night with South Korea and with the European Union to go down to a 50% tariff rate actually is hurting Ford. He says it has handed Toyota a $5,000 car advantage over Ford's American-built cars because Japan has lower labor rates, they have lower currency rates, and
They can buy stuff from China.
and they were already making money. Same thing with GM with its 400,000 vehicles that it exports from South Korea every year. They were making money at a 25% tariff, Ford argues, and now at a 15% tariff, they'll make even more money. They said a Japanese-built 4Runner has a $10,000 advantage over a American-built Bronco. So they feel like they're the American company producing the most cars in America. 80% of what they sell in America, they build in America, and they're getting screwed.
So okay. So one of the things that Farley also talked about yesterday was the fact that because the emission standards seem to be changing, that they'll be saving a whole lot of money because they're not going to be paying credits. Is that going to be an advantage for them?
The emission credits thing is just the deregulation of everything, as Michael can talk about here, is a huge boon for the Detroit automakers because they're truck and SUV companies, and they sell big internal combustion engine vehicles that make tons and tons of money. If they didn't sell those, they couldn't have any EVs. So yes, that is the good news side. They can sell as many, big old Super Duty pickup trucks and fully tricked out, navigators and expeditions as they want, and they don't have to worry about the credits anymore.
So, when I was listening to Farley talk about this, I thought about Bill Ford Jr., who has long been a proponent of environmental issues.
Right.
I mean, how does he feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, he accepted the notion that, cars cause global warming. He accepted that 20 years ago. He was the first one in the industry to say, yep, that's right, and to sort of embrace the whole climate change thing. So clearly he's not on the same page as President Trump. So, and one of his proudest accomplishments was that first hybrid Escape that they did 20 or so
2006, I thought it was,
yeah.
way back.
And he has that in his own personal collection. He has like hybrid Escape #1 in his garage. He's that proud of it. And so, no, I wouldn't think that this meets his philosophical worldview, but it is certainly padding the profits of his company.
That's right. Because they're still losing money on their EVs.
gobs of money. They lost 5.1 billion last year, and they could lose another 5.5 billion this year. Their losses in the EV unit were larger this quarter than the equivalent quarter a year ago. Yeah, they're deeply in the red.
Now, what they did say, though, is a lot of those costs are accounting for the battery plant that's coming up to speed in Marshall, Michigan to make the LFP batteries.
Right, and the development of the Skunk Works smaller
Exactly.
EVs.
So it's not
coming
just
in.
operationally. In fact, operationally, they were bragging about they doubled their EV revenue from a year ago.
But here's how they did that, John. They started selling EVs in Europe.
Correct.
Using VW's MEB platform. That's
Correct.
where all that revenue comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Ford's U.S. EV sales fell 31% in the second
Great
quarter.
point.
So
Great
the
point.
revenue was not increasing here. The
Yeah,
revenue was
right.
going the other way here.
Yeah.
But when you open a new spigot of revenue in Europe that didn't exist last year, well, sure, you doubled your revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, quoting you because I actually have you here.
So you're going to get to Michael in a second, right?
No, well, I mean,
You're not hurting my feelings.
chime in anytime. But I mean, okay, so we're talking here about the EVs and what they're making, but you make the point in your story about this is the fact that the earnings from Ford Blue, the internal combustion engine part, are half of what they were last
A
year.
ago. Yeah.
So how does that happen?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One, tariff cost. If you have 800 million in tariff costs that didn't exist last year, most of those come out of your largest volume unit, which is Ford Blue. And the other part is Ford has these persistent, nagging warranty costs. They are on a record rate. They've had 90 recalls this year. That's a record. They have been the leading company for recalls in America for 4 years. It's a huge problem. Farley says over and over again that they're making progress and they're fixing it, and it's the old cars that are causing them the problems, but that hasn't really shown up in the numbers yet.
That's right. The numbers keep growing.
Right. So Wall Street remains very skeptical of their claims of progress.
One thing to quickly add in here, Ford Blue is where all the ZEV credit costs were booked to.
Mm-hmm.
So with them going away, that right off the bat is going to help Ford Blue.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And the other thing is Ford Pro, their commercial unit, that surprised on the upside. It was still down from last year, but it was more than expected. And Ford Credit, the money machine, continues to surprise on the upside. Thank God for Ford Credit.
And I think we should point out, when we talk about the 90 recalls that Ford has, like second place is maybe Volkswagen at 14 or 15.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, so the gap between here and here. So Michael, how does something like that happen? 90.
Wow. Well, it's obviously it goes back a while, but it's attention to detail. It's structural. It's maybe how you buy your parts, how you put them together. It's any number of possibilities. And I agree with Keith. I mean, it's and even the Ford folks, there's nothing you can fix overnight. It's not like, oh, I'm going to put a task force on it and fix it, but it's among many different types of vehicles, and it's just going to have to be an issue they're just going to have to continue to focus on and one by one fix them, and then obviously more actions for the future to say, hey, listen, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? OTA is probably going to help a little bit of that, but you'd also have to believe that if it's mechanical, OTA is not going to help.
If you have a fuel leak, the software
not many OTA are going to fix that.
That's
so.
one thing they said too, that an OTA is 95% cheaper than having it physically fixed at a dealership.
And so much more convenient for the customer.
Right.
While it sits in the garage, it gets fixed, as opposed to, I have to make an appointment, or at least the dealer's going to come and get my car and all of that nonsense. So not only the 95, but also the convenience of the customer.
This whole warranty thing is a real problem for the industry. Ford's leading, right? And they have the worst situation, but this is by NADA numbers. Last year, automakers spent $28 billion on warranty. About $14 billion on parts and $14 billion on labor. Mm-hmm. So, that's to me, that's my jaw dropped when I saw that number. $28 billion is a lot of money.
Dealers like it.
Dealers love it.
They love it.
And I'll tell you especially why they love it, because the growth of their retail customer repairs is slowed down dramatically in the last couple of years. And the thing that's keeping their back shops humming is all this warranty work.
Right, and the OTAs aren't as plentiful in the legacy automakers as they are with
Oh
Tesla.
no, you're correct.
And
Yeah,
so,
you're
for
right.
example, Ford has had the stop sale on their electric Mustang Mach-E because of that problem with the door locks that could trap occupants inside. So that is a software problem, and it is a software update that's necessary to fix it. But you still had to go to the dealer to have your software flashed. You couldn't do it OTA. So they're on the road to getting there, but they're nowhere near Tesla's expertise in OTA.
That's right. Well, you need an all new electronic architecture to do that. And they're all working on it. But, you saw Ford pretty much axed its Ford network car program.
Right.
All the legacies are struggling with this because if you're a startup and you're starting clean from scratch,
Right.
and you don't have to bring this whole component load along with you to make the changes and work with your suppliers so it's easier for the startups. It's really hard for the legacies.
Especially if you've got like a legacy group within an OEM, maybe the brake team or the transmission team. Well, the electronics, we want to control the brake electronics and the transmission electronics. It's like, no. We'll handle it somewhere else. We'll get your input, but we'll handle it somewhere else because we want to make it much more efficient, much cleaner, much easier to fix if we have to. But it's a big problem. Legacy versus basically brand new out of the box.
Yeah.
I also think supplier relations factors into this warranty
Completely.
issue.
Yes.
You notice like Stellantis and Ford have the lowest supplier relations over and over again, and they have the highest warranty costs and the biggest quality problems. And that's being exacerbated now because of the tariff stuff, right? Because the suppliers have all these higher input costs for their raw materials, and they're going to Ford or the other OEMs and saying, okay, we want to pass these costs along. And Ford is saying, no, you won't. And so it creates more tension because of the tariff stuff in an already tense relationship. That doesn't help quality.
Right. We had Dave Andrea on the show a few weeks back who did the Working Relations Index and showed that Ford's numbers have been precipitously dropping. I mean, I'm sure you worked on that. I mean, how do they explain that?
Well, they don't.
They don't.
Very well. They don't very well, let's be honest. But, they still use, I think, a fairly strong arm tactics with their suppliers, this sort of old school methodology that Stellantis also uses. And the American automakers are kind of set up for that. It's not a keiretsu like the Japanese automakers. There aren't these interlocking ownership relationships that help smooth out things because, you're talking to your investor, not just your customer. So I think there's something inherent about the legacy American automakers' relationships with their suppliers that creates trouble.
I think we got to be careful not to throw them all into the same basket.
Sure.
GM seems to be doing a better job. Their leadership is pretty well run in that respect, and I think their working relationship capability is getting better. But nonetheless, I do believe it's we got to be careful. And there are some Japanese OEMs that let's face it, don't have the greatest reputation either, and a couple of Germans. So it's kind of all over the place. But I think it is an important criteria in terms of the quality of the vehicle and technology. If you're a supplier and your OEM treats you well, or your tier one treats you well, you're more apt to go to them and say, I've got this new technology. I think it's going to make your life easier. Customers are willing to pay up for it, blah, 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 as opposed to having constant issues with your customer being either an OEM or a tier one. Is like, yeah, I'm just going to sell you the old stuff because I know it works, and I'm going to give this better stuff to someone else. And I think that's always another problem that kind of works its way through.
So what do you think GM does differently? Because they do have better relationships with their suppliers. But they have the same structure that the other two have.
Yeah, I think they do have the same structure, but I think it goes to I think their view is it may be a bit different than the other ones, and there has been some turnover in some of the, I would say, on the procurement side in some of the other areas, but in GM's team has been somewhat more stable, and I think that probably lends to it. And I think they all understand you can't build a car without strong supplier relationships. I just think that they all go at it a bit different.
Yeah, I can tell you, though, several things that GM's doing differently. It's identified a core number of suppliers. I don't know the number. I'll just say like 100 suppliers. They get involved very early in a program. They are given, I'm not going to say the first right of refusal, but they're because of their early involvement, they're almost undoubtedly going to get sourced on whatever program that they're working on. GM has also been bending over backwards to communicate. Whether it's production changes, whether it's program changes, whether it's design changes, whatever it happens to be, they've really concentrated on doing it. And so we've seen with the relationship study that Dave Andrea was talking about, for something like 4 years in a row, GM just keeps going better and getting better rated by all the suppliers. And if it keeps up this rate, it's going to be knocking on Honda's, so it's Toyota number 1, Honda number 2, now GM 3.
John, the gap is like this.
It's a good problem to have, though.
I mean, it's going to take a long time.
Problem, but that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
You mentioned something interesting, John, about future product programs and the churn. And, we've been telling our clients this for a little while, but because of all this tariff interruption and what's going on with emissions legislation that finally got somewhat settled, we're going to lose anywhere between 12 to 18 months of planning in our industry. If you think about it.
Explain that a little bit more.
And let's go back to maybe July or August of last year, when we knew that it could be a very good possibility that there could be a change in government. And change in, and which would mean
this is pre-election,
July of 24, August of 24, that there very well could be. It wasn't going to be a slam dunk for the Biden administration. Obviously, that changed as well, but we knew that there could be a change. And I submit, I know a lot of suppliers and OEMs like, whoa, if there's going to be a change, I'm going to hold back here just to make sure, because I don't want to start communicating things or investing here and investing there when it could be really money that hasn't been well spent. Add to that all the money that the manufacturers and the suppliers have spent on battery electric, as we call BEVing. We've turned it into a verb. But, as you BEV, there's been a lot of underutilized capital, and I say that nicely. So add that and the change that they're probably changing. And now we're still in the middle of, we don't know what's going to happen with USMCA. We don't know if there's going to be tariffs on parts or no tariffs on parts, or what the tariffs are going to be on vehicles, much to what you said earlier. So all of that probably to the end of the year. We'll have 18 months where everybody's sitting in their hands working on short-term problems, and we're not really working on 28, 29, and 30 vehicles and getting out. We don't know what the sourcing structure should be. We can't communicate to our suppliers. We know for sure we're going to exactly make this vehicle and it's going to look like this. The certainty is getting better, but it is a big problem. And in some respects, we've let the Chinese OEMs just, you're going to take a break. We're going to just keep moving. Yeah. And that's our read on the situation.
Well, so speaking of suppliers, I saw this quote. ZF came out with their numbers, and they are doing okay. But this was striking to me, and this is a quote from Dr. Holger Klein, who is the CEO of ZF from Germany. Quote, stagnating global vehicle production, the sluggish ramp-up of electromobility, and uncertainty arising from U.S. tariffs mean lower sales and rising costs. We are addressing these issues and accelerating our restructuring program. This is a tough road, but the right one for ZF. And basically what he's saying about this restructuring is they are downsizing the company. But you get back to this thing of stagnating global vehicle production, sluggish ramp-up of electromobility, and uncertainty arising from U.S. tariffs. I mean, how does a company deal with those things?
It is treacherous, to be completely honest. And I know a number of tier one suppliers, and trust me, they are having a hell of a time right now. It is difficult because your customer in the OEM comes to you and says, I'm going to spend money on X. But even they're a little squishy about volumes depending on what it is. And then we've got all these, what we call DER, delays, extensions, and rescopes. We've delayed BEVs, or sometimes rescoped them into a submission and canceled them. We've extended ICE vehicles, and anytime one of those activities occur, it's it's either a good thing or a bad thing for the supplier, depending on what side of the equation you're on. You might be building an ICE component and it get extended by 2 years. Everybody might say, oh, well, let's pop the champagne corks. But if your margin's already low, and then you got to go back to your OEM customer and say, hey, by the way, I'm not making any money on this thing. So, and by the way, my tool's old, my machine's old, and that square footage, I was really hoping to do something else with it. So in some respects, it's not a good thing when these vehicles get extended. So, we submit that North America could be the home of slower technology turnover for at least the next 6 or 7 years, because we basically have told the market, take a break. We're going to keep building some of the older stuff. We're not going to get a credit for any good things we're doing on the fuel economy side, at least not a lot. So we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. It's going to be a lot of extensions of existing technology.
Yeah, I had one guy tell me the U.S. is going to become the global leader in V8 development.
We have been. We're just going to continue to be.
We're going to maintain it, right? Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so Keith, Farley mentioned that in a couple weeks from now they're going to have like a Model T moment.
Yes.
What can you tell us about this?
So, this is interesting. Farley is turning. They are currently in an EV desert. They have no new electric vehicles coming until 2027. So their last new electric vehicle was the Lightning. And how long have we had that now? 3 years? And so they've got really old product, and that's affecting demand, not to mention that mainstream buyers don't want electric vehicles, so it hurts it even more. That's a virtue to Ford, because GM's out there with all these new EVs and there's no demand for it. That was their take.
One point Farley made is they have to continue those to the end of their product cycle.
Right. And here we come. And so on August 11th down in Louisville, they're going to do this event where they're going to show their next EV platform. They've kind of already telegraphed this really for quite a long time now. This is that Skunkworks project out in California that's being led by the former Tesla guy, Alan Clark. And they're coming with a small to mid-sized pickup truck in 2027 that'll be powered by a lower cost LFP battery made in Marshall, Michigan. We know all of that stuff. I'm not sure what else they're going to tell us. I guess we're going to see a prototype. I don't really know. But we know for certain what the vehicle is, what the body type is, what the battery is going to be, and what the price point is going to be, because they said it's going to be below $30,000. So I guess they're going to add some more flesh to that bone, but it feels kind of fleshed out already.
Okay. Yeah, they told me they're not going to show any sheet metal at all.
Okay, then what are they going to show, John?
They're going to talk about the platform.
They're going to show the battery.
And talk about the Skunkworks and how it developed this platform.
Doesn't feel new.
So my question is that, we've established that EV sales are not all that bang up.
For damn sure.
And we've also established from what, Michael was saying about the extension of the internal combustion engine going forward. So what does Ford hope to achieve from this?
Yeah, I think they're trying to create some excitement, but it really cuts against what's happening in Washington with public policy toward EVs, which is cutting the legs out of every stimulus to sell EVs. The $7,500 consumer tax credit is going away on September 30th. That was part of President Trump's big, beautiful bill. They clung to the manufacturing credits, barely. And I feel like it won't be long till that goes away.
And this is for making the batteries that they make.
Yes, the
$45.
Yeah, and then of course now we're taking away regulatory impetus for regulating climate change. So,
i.e. no fines if you exceed the CO2 limits.
Right, and so that means there's really no push for alternate powertrains, and there is push, as President Trump has done with everything else, with coal and oil and everything. There is push for the old world methods of transportation, no push for the new methods of transportation that the Chinese are running away with. So it creates.
And think about what you just said. It's not only a propulsion question, but new platforms were given way to, well, we can lightweight them. We can put more lighter materials, either lightweight steels or aluminums or whatever in. But if there's no real reason to lightweight vehicles, why are they going to redo platforms? It costs a lot of money to redo them.
Right, yeah.
So, I'm hearing out of one OEM that, they used to think in 5-year chunks. Every 5 years or 6 years, we'd redo a vehicle, either a major or an all new. And in the middle, we'll do an mid-cycle enhancement. It's kind of time and material. We do that. And now they're starting to talk about 8-year programs, 9-year programs, where they might have 2 or 3 mid-cycle enhancements in the middle. As a supplier, and if you're underneath the vehicle, you're going, whoa, my economics just changed. I need, instead of dividing by 5, I need to divide by 8 or 9 or 10. In terms of, my machine needs to last this long, my tooling needs to last this long, what's my margin going to be at the end of the program? This is a major shift for the industry.
And Farley also tied this to sort of a major shift for the global industry. Instead of being a global industry, he feels like we are going back to being a very regional auto industry.
We're re-regionalizing. Because we were, and we turned global, and now we're going back.
Right.
And if you think about it, China's moving in their direction on BEVs. The Europeans are slowing down, but they're still going to move at a slower pace. And North America, well, I guess the U.S., just basically crawling almost to a crawl.
Right.
And so those 3 regions are going to continue to split.
Right.
And it's going to be more difficult to have interregional volume going back and forth because nobody's going to want the vehicles.
Yeah, right.
So volume per nameplate is going to go down, and it's economies of scale is going to be a real driver going forward. I agree.
So let me ask you, all 3 of you, this. I mean, when Farley is using the Model T, okay, which is, Ford talks about icons all the time. Okay, this is like the most iconic vehicle maybe ever, right? I mean, and it put the world on wheels, but apparently the world is not all that interesting anymore. But if this doesn't turn into something that's phenomenal, hasn't he basically besmirched the Model T?
It's an interesting way to look at it. Let's see what they show us. I mean, let's see what these guys come out with. What Farley and I think all the legacies recognize is China's getting to market far, far faster by doing things differently, really by copying Tesla. And, smash the silos in the organization, get co-located cross-functional teams, let them go like a bat out of hell. And he knows that Ford's got to do this. And he knows that, the organization in Dearborn could never get that done. Never, ever, ever. That's why he went with the Skunk Works. So let's see what these supposedly some of the smartest people in the world that they went out and recruited from all over the world. Let's see what they came up with. My only question is, I think they're going to come out with a product that is sensational from a cost standpoint and a technology standpoint. What happens when they hand that over back into the normal legacy system to productionize it and get it built? That's usually when these things fall apart.
And my other concern too is not just about the propulsion system in terms of falling behind the Chinese. The Chinese are doing way more than just making cheap battery electric vehicles. They're putting incredible technology on those vehicles. BYDs, what is it? Their hand of God. I mean, there are all
Eye of God, yeah.
That's it. Eye of God, that's it. They have all this phenomenal, the cars park themselves over several levels in a parking structure. You just get out and it sniffs out its own parking space. They have all this tech that is being enabled by these, software-driven vehicles that are built on big batteries that we're not doing because we don't have much of a market for electric vehicles, and all the OEMs are pulling back from development and investing in that technology.
I would submit they look at capital differently than a lot of the Western world. Mm-hmm. So there may be a new Chinese nameplate that comes on the market, and they feel, it's doing okay, but not as well as I'd like. They'll change it the next model year. It's almost like back to the 50s where we were back here in Detroit, where they would change the front and rear ends on a pretty regular basis. And that would be verboten in Detroit. Why would we ever want to do that? That's got to run for a couple of years before I can get that fascia and the rear end to get paid for itself. And then maybe I'll think about changing it. Mm-hmm. They don't care. It doesn't, to them, they iterate so quickly that they feel our customer wants us to keep moving forward.
But remember, almost no car company in China makes money.
Agreed.
You've got Tesla, BYD, Great Wall, Li Auto, and I think there's one other. And except for BYD, all the ones that I mentioned make peanuts for profits. I mean, they make next to nothing.
It's about government support, isn't it?
That comes back to, I think, what Michael was getting at when you said they look at the cost of capital differently. It's free.
Yeah.
Free
or close to free, but you're right. I mean, a lower cost of capital. I mean, let's face it. Everybody in Detroit is paying 8, 9, 10% on lines of credit. I'm not. Again, I don't know what they're paying in other parts of the world, but that's definitely, that goes into the equation of what we do.
Yeah.
So.
See, what concerns me about what using the Model T, this reminds me of before the Segway came out. Remember when it was Project Ginger, and that's what we knew this to be, and it was going to be the most phenomenal thing, transportation device that we'd ever seen, and then the Segway comes out and all the air goes out of the balloon, and I just And whether the platform is magnificent, and what is a consumer going to think? Okay, is a consumer going to say, "Wow, this is the most fantastic thing I've ever seen in my lifetime"? The way the Model T was when it arrived on the scene. Suddenly there had been cars before that, but suddenly I can afford to buy one. This is something that's going to be for me. And is Ford going to do that? Is Ford going to change the perception of electric vehicles among the market that, as we've said many times?
I don't think any American consumer, including those who bought Tesla in the early days, were looking for an electric propulsion system. They just thought it was a cool car, and that's why they bought it. Mm-hmm. And so you can't wow them with that kind of what consumers view as mundane technology. Just get me there. I don't care if it's electric or gas or whatever, And it's also hard to wow them with technology they haven't experienced yet. It's the old Henry Ford axiom that if you asked a consumer what they would have wanted 100 years ago, they would have said a faster horse. So they can't understand eye of God until they've experienced eye of God. And it's this chicken and egg thing. So I don't know, if you show them a platform or talk about their software-defined vehicle or all that kind of stuff, I'm not sure consumers are connecting or wowed by that.
Yeah, I totally agree. But we got to take a quick break right now for our great sponsor, Bridgestone.
Performance that shines, even in the rain. That's what really matters. Bridgestone Potenza tires, improved grip in wet conditions.
All right, we're back talking. I sort of cut you off there, Keith, but I completely agree with what you're saying. With all the incentives going away for buying EVs, now for the automaker, look, they've put a ton of money into these EV things. They may cancel a program here, push another one back there. They cannot walk away from this stuff. So now it's incumbent upon them to come out with products where people go, damn, I don't care what's under the hood. I want that.
Right.
That's what I want.
That's exactly what's going to. Now we're looking at more the natural rate of growth for BEVs. That's what we're really looking at now. And we're going to start to see how much the U.S. consumer really wants them, especially we start to BEV in the middle of the market. I wouldn't say it was easy, but we were on the edges. We were doing some luxury products, we're doing some pickup trucks, but now we're starting to BEV in the middle where Mom and Pa Smith from Des Moines actually need a car. And it'll be interesting to see how that works its way through. We've obviously had to ratchet back our forecasts, but it's really interesting. But it's more of a natural rate of growth through 2030. And then one might say, well, after this administration, what's going to happen? But as we've seen, it won't stop on a dime. It's got its own sort of momentum, probably through 31 or 32 before the next administration can say, okay, I may want to ramp this up a little bit because maybe we've strayed too far from the rest of the world and we need to catch up a little bit. But we're probably got about at least 5 to 6 years of this, to be completely honest.
So of 5 to 6 years of what? Uncertainty or
no. I would say slow emissions legislative improvement. I would call it improvement, but basically the emissions legislation driving what consumers are going to want to buy here. I mean, I think to what was Keith said earlier, it's caveat. I mean, basically, they're going to buy whatever they like. If they want to buy a V8, they want to buy a V12, have at it. It's going to be available.
Right. I mean, and one of the things that we've talked about many times on the show is the affordability crisis that exists out there. I mean, with average transaction prices being just under 49 grand for a vehicle, and it occurs to me that okay, if you put two vehicles next to each other, compact CUVs, and one has a gasoline engine and one is an electric vehicle, and the one with the gasoline engine costs 10 grand less, what is the consumer going to do?
It wins every time.
Right.
That's what happens.
But here's the thing: we're
Or
going to have
9
to
out
keep
of 10 times.
we're going to have to keep an eye on used EVs. I mean, the prices are way down. In fact, I was just reading this report on used cars, and they're saying by this time next year, used EVs by far are going to be the cheapest alternative to anybody looking for a used car. And what was it that we reported, Sean, this week? You can get a Mercedes EQS. I mean, this is like, it's an S-Class, right?
Oh,
it's an
it's a
electric
beautiful car.
for $30,000.
Wow.
So there's going to be somebody saying, should I get that used RAV4 for 30 grand? Or should I get a Mercedes electric S-Class, an EQS?
But how does that help the industry if people are just buying these old vehicles?
Does it normalize electric vehicles in some way? Does it get more electric vehicles on the road?
Although then the question becomes, okay,
I don't know.
how confident is the person going to be that the battery is going to be fine for X number of years? So if you buy the used RAV4, pretty much that it's going to run forever.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
I do not think we're a little bit past that. That's been, I wouldn't call it a wise tale, but yeah, and there's been some horror stories out there, but I think we're a little bit past that. Oh, I'm going to have to change the battery out 4 or 5 years down the road. I don't think.
I think we're going past it. It's still a concern out there in the
I
general public.
I think we're past that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I know I am.
The general public is not past it,
Right.
or much of the general public.
They're familiar with flashlight batteries, right? Pretty soon that flashlight isn't quite as bright as it used to be, and therefore,
But
or on your phone goes down over time, right? And consumers know that, and they're like, "Damn it, I got to get a new phone."
It's like part of the charging infrastructure concerns that consumers have, which are legit. There aren't enough chargers out there for sure. But the sellers of electric vehicles will tell you, no, it's like your iPhone. You plug it in when you go to bed in your garage, and when you wake up in the morning, it's all charged up. It's not the same as going to a gas station. You don't need as many charging stations as you do gas stations, but you can't convince American consumers of that. They feel like I'm going to be driving on vacation and I'll need to fill up somewhere, and will it be there for me?
But Michael, okay, with all the money that has, as John's pointed out, the OEMs have invested a lot of money in EVs, but now with the change in the emissions rules, suddenly they can bring back the Hemi. They can do things they weren't doing before. So they have a finite amount of capital to invest. Where do they invest it?
They're obviously being a lot more careful about where they invest. And so you're not hearing about a lot of brand new BEV platforms that they're going to launch in 28, 29, and 30. That's all been pushed out. They're more or less redoing existing ICE platforms. Maybe they're looking at an engine and adding a hybrid capability to it. That's something that's actually pretty popular these days. They're taking BEV platforms and saying, okay, well, maybe we need to add a range extender to it. So they're looking at the front packaging. And as you all know, I mean, it's about the thermal, but you don't, and obviously crash is a bit of an issue as well, but you don't care so much about where the engine sits in the front because it doesn't have to be aligned with the front wheels. It's just a thing, I joke, and Honda may not want me to hear this, but think about it, it's like a Honda generator sitting in the front of your car. It runs, it charges your battery sometimes, and sometimes it goes back to the electric motor. But so there's some flexibility there. I make it sound like it's easy, but you're adding a exhaust system, a thermal system, a fuel system, and all the usuals are going to be there. So it is much more complicated. But more and more OEMs are looking at, okay, this was a BEV platform. I need to make this into a BEV and a REV platform. And they're also looking at their ICE vehicles and saying, well, maybe I'll do a mild hybrid and a full hybrid. Plugins, depending on the OEM, they've had good and bad situations, so it depends on the OEM. But that is really going to be the focus going forward. I would say that lightweighting, not so much, which is, not great if you're trying to substitute your material into somebody else's. And they're going to want to cut costs. They're absolutely going to want to carry over parts as much as they can and cut costs as much as they can. They got to get their ROI up. And as we detrim vehicles, that's the other thing that's going on right now, is we're starting to detrim vehicles, not putting as much leather and all the content in. They're starting to bring it down, to bring that price down. That's also going to impact profitability as well.
Farley talked about range extended trucks and PHEV trucks. What do you think? Is the consumer going to go for that?
I think that there are consumers that will look at a range extender and say, okay, this is the best of all worlds. I've got the acceleration of an EV. I've got the torque of an EV, but yet I don't have to worry about finding a charger. I can go 500-600 miles and I'm good. And I can just fill up with fuel. Now, one would say, well, you're carrying two powertrains on board. Agreed. I think that that's incredibly inefficient, but there's going to be a pocket of consumers to say, I've got the best of all of it. I launch the way I want to launch. It's quiet. It does all it's supposed to do. And the engine doesn't run at like 2,500 RPM. You sit at a light, it goes down to 750, and then you're running and maybe it goes up to 1,500 or a little bit higher. But all it's doing is just putting power back into the battery or towards the electric motor.
But when you say there's a pocket, I mean, how big a segment of the market is this, and does it provide profitability for the OEM to scale these things?
Well, they've got the platform now. So much to what was said earlier, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's not like they're going to shut these platforms down. They have to keep moving, because a lot of these OEMs are also still active in China. Not as active as they used to be, but they're still active. So they are going to need some of these technologies for China, and maybe they're also active in Europe. They're going to need them for Europe and some other markets as well. So, but North America is their primary market. That pocket is slim. Don't get me wrong. I don't disagree with you. It's not like all the plumbers out there are saying, this is exactly the type of vehicle I need. No, they're not saying that. It is the weekend warrior that might look at that and say, this actually meets all my needs. So,
and Farley talked about this last night, as you said, John. EREVs are a great solution, but they're still not a great towing solution, because that can still drain the battery really quickly, and you're switching over to the sort of burning more gas. So what I don't know if you heard him say this last night, but what he referenced is, an EREV would be a good fit for a 3-row SUV. The exact thing they killed a year ago this time.
The BEV version.
Their electric 3-row SUV. And so what he was telegraphing there is, yes, we're going to bring that platform back, because they had engineered the whole thing. We're going to bring that back as an EREV.
No, I did not hear that. That's very interesting. But, to your point, that if you're towing, it really puts a strain on an EREV. This is why the Ram, what was the
Ram Charger is the EREV.
What was the EREV? It's a V6. Mm-hmm. It's not a little 2-liter or 1.5-liter engine. It's a V6 for the very reason that you cited.
Right.
When you're pulling heavy loads up a grade, you got to be able to run that generator at
it sounds like
max output.
That was their criteria, because you could easily ask, why wouldn't you have put a 2-liter in there,
right,
and save some fuel, save weight, all those other things. 3.6 already packaged into that vehicle, kinda. They've already got the thermal and it's all done. And I think that was the mindset. Can we go up Pikes Peak and tow something, and the engine can still drive the electric motor at the speed that we need it? Mm-hmm. I hate to say it, I'm not an engineer, but that sounds like that was the criteria.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting about EREVs is, because you are running them in a limited rev range, you can take a lot of cost out of the engine.
Absolutely.
And
Don't need turbo.
You don't need
Don't need variable valve.
Right. You
All
can
that goes
run
away.
far higher EGR for cleaner emissions, a whole bunch of things. So what I find interesting about EREVs is it's a real interesting merger of ICE and BEV technology. You need them both. And we're way behind the Chinese when it comes to these EREV engines. I mean, who is it? Chang'an and was it BYD have the highest thermodynamic efficiency of any ICE engines in the world, and by a wide margin too. So I think the ICE engineers are going to be busy, not just retooling V8s for production, but figuring out how do we take cost and noise out of these EREV engines.
Because those engines are not going to have to go over 2,000 RPM at any point in their lives. There's going to be no reason to. So all the electronics are basically going to keep them between 700, 750, and up to about 1,800, and anywhere in between. And so you optimize the engine when you're able to do something like that.
But again, you said this is still a small segment. So, I get back to this investment thing. And Farley said, new investments in ICE, more efficient and performance hybrids, and full electric vehicles are all on tap at Ford. So Keith, of these three buckets, where do you see them putting their investments?
They already are. They've lowered their investments in EVs substantially, like to the tune of $12 billion.
How much?
12, 1, 2. And,
12 billion.
Yeah. And
Whoa.
so they are trying to increase their investment in hybrids, because hybrids are now, for them, I think about 20% of their business. I could be wrong, 15 to 20. For Toyota, they're a huge part of their business.
It's over 50.
Yeah, but it is still, to Michael's point, it is still redundant powertrains. It's still a more costly solution. So you're always going to get a higher return on investment with an internal combustion engine vehicle. And that is clearly where the legacy Detroit automakers are moving money. I mean, including General Motors, who instead of turning Lake Orion into an EV factory, is turning it into a pickup and SUV factory. That's where Detroit makes its money, and that's where they're going to put their money down.
That was just a matter of time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Michael, do you see it? The play is to go forward on ICE products, and then supplemented with hybrid products, and then over here will be the EVs and EREVs.
Yeah, I think what you're going to, I mean, ICE will still be here, but it is going to decline. I think you're going to find more mild hybrids and more full hybrids are going to work their way into the equation, because customers are going to look for better fuel economy. I don't think they're going to be clamoring for it, but they're going to be looking for better fuel economy. I mean, fuel is still $3.50, $4 a gallon, and probably not going to change off that anytime soon. So at that rate, consumers are still going to be looking for better fuel economy. So I don't think that's going to go away. But I think you're right. You're going to have kind of the ICE, what we call multi-energy, ICE and hybrid in one situation, and then the BEVs and the EREVs in another situation. And because they're taking all these BEV platforms and making sure, can we throw an engine in the front? And to be honest, I've talked to a couple of OEMs, a brand new one, by the way, but a couple of OEMs have basically said, yeah, that's a rework. I mean, that's a repackage. And that means a lot of cost. But I think most OEMs kind of thought about this in advance, and they're saying to themselves, we'll find a way to do it if we have to. And there are a couple of new vehicles coming out that are definitely being engineered for both. Absolutely.
I talked to Scott Keogh, who is the head of Scout, the new electric vehicle line from Volkswagen. And, they got very far down their development path and then added EREVs. And I said, did that delay you? How much rework is that? And he characterized it as, and Michael, you would know better, as not that substantial rework. They could use the same platforms. They could add a small engine. They have a pickup truck that's a Rivian size type pickup truck, medium. They have an SUV, also kind of Rivian sized. And so they will be launching with both EREVs and BEVs, and they didn't have to delay their launch. They didn't have to delay the launch of the EREVs. He characterized it as simple is oversimplifying, but as not as complex as you might think.
They had a little bit more real estate to deal with, I would say. Smaller, let's call it C or CD platforms that are in the BEV space.
Mm-hmm.
putting an engine in front of one of those is a completely different story.
Yeah, more
I would
room,
submit
right?
that a lot more room,
Mhm.
packaging. It's all about packaging. Where do I put the fuel tank? Where do I put this? Where do I put that?
Mhm.
How do you package it all?
But
If you think about it, sorry, but you've got this. You have this battery that basically was completely under the vehicle,
Mhm.
and now you've got to find a way to move exhaust. And you're not going to put your fuel tank in the front. Nobody really does that anymore. So you got to move your fuel tank's got to go in the back, and your exhaust has to go in the back. So now, what do? You put part of the battery in the tunnel and make some room for it? It does turn into a little bit of a packaging nightmare. If you got a bigger vehicle, you've got some levers you can pull.
Mhm.
So
Well, see, I was just wondering. So Scout, I mean, so here's a new brand to the market, basically, right?
Or revived.
And coming out with EVs and EREVs. Okay, so it's coming out with a product that is not going to be as appealing as it was when you got $7,500 for buying one,
Mhm.
and another type of technology that nobody really knows about, right? So Scott Keogh sleeping well at night, John?
No, because besides those technological and marketing challenges, he's going to have whopping lawsuits on his hands as he
Oh.
tries to sell these things direct. And
He already
dealers,
does.
especially Volkswagen dealers, go absolutely nuclear on him for not using franchise dealers.
He already has lawsuits. There's one in California. There's one in Florida. So
Right.
from VW.
There will
down.
be at least 50.
Yeah. That's going to be a huge challenge for them, for sure.
But look, you made your bed, now you got to sleep in it, the old saying. They planned this whole thing. They're building a multi-billion-dollar plant. They've sourced this vehicle out. They have plans of how they're going to go forward on it all. They're going to go forward. And now, whether it becomes a success or maybe the Volkswagen Group does step in and say, Audi really needs some U.S. manufacturing. Why don't we move these Scouts aside and see how many Audis we can build? I don't know. But you bet they're going to go through with it.
I put Scout's new South Carolina plant and Ford's new Tennessee plant in the same boat. These were built at the peak of the hype cycle, or conceived, to be 300,000 unit, pure battery electric vehicle truck factories. And turns out there isn't demand for that. But they've already sunk the costs, billions and billions of costs. So they got to find a way to get some kind of return on that investment. And it won't be by producing exclusively battery electric vehicles.
So
No
Michael,
way.
what is like? Keith
it's
said
not
it's
only the
billions.
capital, it's the loss of economies of scale. If you were going to build 200,000 of something, then you divide by 200,000 for the development costs and all of that. But if you're only going to build 50 of something or 75 of something, and it's going to be choppy, that is a different economic equation. So you've got a variable cost and a fixed cost situation that both aren't very, very, very appealing. And it's gonna be a long time until some of these projects can get above water. Let's put it that way.
And everybody talks about, well, okay, so add EREVs to the line. Scout obviously already is doing that. But as Michael was just saying, that's a nascent, it's a non-existent market in the U.S. right now. So we have to educate consumers. So that's not going to fill up the volume, EREVs.
Right.
So what fills up the volume?
Right. And I got a question for you, Keith. So the Ford Model T EV is going into, is it Lexington?
We think it will go into Louisville.
Oh, Louisville. Excuse me, Louisville.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why is it going into Louisville and not into that brand new plant?
It's an excellent question, but I think it's the same essential size platform as an Escape, and of course the Escape is going to go away, and so I think it replaces that in the cycle plan. And if you have a plant that was already building something with hard points that are essentially the same size, I bet the tear up is less. I don't know. Maybe Michael could reflect on that, but I think it fits in that plant.
If you go backwards into plants, and that's kind of my specialty for good or for bad, KTP, which is down the road,
Kentucky Truck Plant.
Sorry I'll turn that in English. Is massive, but they work on 3 crew. But for a long, long time, Louisville was the largest assembly plant, at least with one line in the United States, and in fact in North America. They made Explorers there. They made Rangers there. It was a real melting pot. It was a very productive plant. Escape was there, built there for a long, long time, and we moved from Kansas City over to Louisville. But I agree, and there's going to be a little bit of a hole in the portfolio there. Let's think about that. So you start at the portfolio, go Bronco Sport, and then yeah, there's a Bronco, but it's a little bit over to the side. Is more rough and tumble, rough and ready kind of off-roading type, and you go all the way to an Explorer, and there's nothing in between.
Mm-hmm.
That's and I'm sure the Ford management looks at that and says, we got to find a way to start filling in some of that space.
Well, why would you drop Escape? And what's the Lincoln, the Corsair?
Corsair,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I mean, don't they look at the RAV4, which is biting at the heels of the F series for sales?
Yeah, for leadership, right? No, I think they make more money off a Bronco Sport, and a Bronco Sport and a Escape are the same size, and I think they want to ride the Bronco.
That makes sense.
But will they get the volume?
Well, and then to add to your Bronco Sport, comes out of Hermosillo in Mexico. So
exactly.
Who knows what's going to happen with tariffs and all of that respect. So again, I think similar to what we're saying, a lot of these decisions were made a couple of years ago when there were many more knowns. This is very Rumsfeldian. There was known knowns and unknown unknowns, and boy, we got a lot of unknown unknowns right now, unfortunately. And we could always Monday morning quarterback and say, well, that wasn't such a good decision. But I guess with everything that they knew at the time, this is the highest probability decision. So let's move forward on this. And obviously, with what happened in Washington, the automotive industry is really feeling it right now.
Well,
really,
and they
really
were all chasing Tesla back then. Tesla was the North Star. And now, of course, Tesla is a fading star, and they're all chasing BYD.
Right. But the American consumer is completely oblivious to BYD. There is no idea that there is such a thing that exists
here. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So why does it matter?
Well, because it will exist here someday. You can't hold back the tide forever, and eventually it'll make its way here, whether they have to build a plant in Mexico and ship them over the border or whatever. BYD will get here, as will, Geely's already here, right? Yeah. So we already have Chinese EVs in this market.
Via Volvo.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. But they're just not big sellers. So they will find their way in.
I completely agree. What we've done is now, as the Western OEMs lose volume in China and they kind of come running back to either Europe or North America, whatever their home market is, they obviously don't have as much demand diversification. But they've also basically told the Chinese, well, we don't want you in North America, and we're going to make it more difficult for you to be competitive in Europe unless you build here. Just go and sell vehicles everywhere else. Uh-huh. And so export markets that we used to enjoy in places like Saudi Arabia and the Middle East and in places like Africa, those are going to decline. I mean, look at what happened to Thailand. I mean, the Chinese share growth is incredible. I mean, I remember when Toyota was 40% of the market, and it's not that way anymore. So anybody who thinks that this will be a slow path, I think has to pinch themselves. It's not going to be. And to your point, the Chinese are going to get, and I call it as one big melting pot. There's going to be a lot of consolidation. There's going to be 4 or 5 players that really do well, and they're going to basically sit on their doorstep and say, we're ready. Mm-hmm. And we've got all this scale and we control all these other things. And in some way, shape, or form, we're going to have to find a way to work with them in this market.
And that's what Farley was saying last night, that they are not trying to be competitive against the global electric vehicle makers. They're trying to be competitive specifically with the Chinese. That's it. That's their bogey.
Yeah, well, they're at the top of the list, right? Or the head of the class. I mean, as I've said before, there's some crummy Chinese companies, but the best of them are the best in the world.
So Michael, I have a question. Part of the whole tariff thing is to bring manufacturing back to the United States. How expensive is it for a car company to bring something back?
Well, if you can find the tooling, which again, I would say the U.S. has some labor issues, in terms of availability of lower cost, semi-skilled labor, that kind of thing. We really have a tooling problem. and I've got a good friend who brought this up years ago, and now I completely agree with what he's saying. We've got a massive tooling problem. We could say, we want to move this vehicle from Mexico into a plant in Michigan. Well, that's all great, but guess what? A lot of the hard tools, and we got to get a lot of that from China. So we're actually asking China to help us co-locate more production here. It's not the situation we should be in. And that is not an easy fix. So I say, to answer your question, the tooling is part of it. I would also submit, we've heard out of a couple of OEMs that 15% is kind of that teeter-totter. If we're at 15% tariff, we might stay where we are. And if we're above that, oh gosh, that gets a little bit difficult. I'm going to have to start to co-locate. So, and again, that's not a hard and fast rule, but that's kind of a loose one that we've heard out in the industry. And that's probably one of the reasons why we're hearing about 10 and 15%. That seems to be something that will drive longer term behaviors, not right away, I'm going to shut this plant down tomorrow and move everything tomorrow. I think the industry still basically adheres to the longer term, let's get the program to pay for itself, and then when we need to resource it, we're really going to think about what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm. So Gary, we're at the top of the hour just about. You want to recap?
Yeah, I want Keith to tell me what Ford's going to be in 5 years.
Yeah, I think they will be still a ICE-driven, internal combustion engine-driven truck and SUV company. And the F-Series will continue to be the profit driver for that total company as they lean more into the commercial vehicle business. And that's another thing Farley said last night. They're going to put more investment in commercial vehicles because they're getting such a good return. And that's where they're seeing the recurring revenue with the software service business. So as you go more into commercial, that means more trucks, more vans, more SUVs.
Yeah.
So the normal consumer is not going to be getting as much from the Ford Motor Company as they have in history.
They
right?
practically get nothing in Europe anymore, right?
Explorer.
Ford used to be like the manager's car. It was the company car, the Mondeo, right? It used to be a big passenger car company. It's mostly commercial in Europe now. I don't think it'll be mostly commercial here, but I think commercial will be much larger than it has been for them.
Yeah. Michael, your recap. What do you think?
John, I remember when we used to do this when it was more at like 6 or 7 at night, and we used to bring beer in. So
I know.
we need to start bringing beer in again. And you're probably thinking, how did you drive home? We only had 1 or 2, and my wife sometimes would make cookies.
Yeah, that's right.
We have to return to that.
I like that idea, actually, quite a bit.
My recap is, I would say that given everything that's going on, there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. It's getting a little bit more now that the OBBBA has been signed and in law. At least we know what we're dealing with. But on the tariff side, there's still a lot of insecurity out there, and profitability is still going to be pretty sketchy for the next couple of quarters until this kind of settles down. And I think that this is going to be much like what we said. This is going to be a low technology turnover region for a number of years. And get ready, we're going to have longer life cycles, lower technology turnover, maybe more design changes to make cars look better. But those will be cheaper to do than a full platform redo, and more electronics, maybe to add some content and consumer features. But it's a different world that we're going to be living in for the next 5 to 6 years for sure.
Gary, your recap.
I'm just dwelling on what he just said about basically the U.S. becomes the technology backwater. and I mean,
you think about, we used to send China our old and tired platforms. I'm not sure we're going to get quite to that point, but I remember someone said we packaged up an old Rover and we sent it over to China because they wanted to build it. I don't think we're going to get to that point, but I think we're going to start losing that technology race, not so much with Europe, but definitely with China, and the differences between our regions are going to grow. And I don't like the idea of that occurring. I really don't.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, my recap is all this week and a little bit of last week, we've been reporting on automakers' second quarter earnings. Without fail, all of their earnings plummeted without fail, every single one. And I think the second half of the year is going to be worse. That's my recap.
I think you're right.
A little something to look forward to, huh?
Right.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking gloom and doom here, but I think one of the reasons our audience watches is they know they're going to get it straight from us. We're not going to gloss over things.
Well, I think to your point, though, tariffs that are supposed to be promoting the American auto industry is making it poorer and less profitable.
And I think we'll see, net of everything, fewer automotive jobs, manufacturing jobs.
Yeah.
So, well, we could go for another half hour on this, but I mean, what as I said earlier, wasn't it to bring back manufacturing to the United States, and I would assume that would mean more jobs, but.
Yeah.
I had one guy say, if you're trying to move jobs from Mexico to the United States, what you're going to do is increase robot sales.
Yes, that's right.
From companies that may not be based in the United States. But,
Right.
Well,
Anyway, with that, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank all of you for having tuned in.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.